We are coming out of one of the most divisive political seasons that I can remember. I have been in politics since 1976. I can remember 1968 pretty clearly and the horrors of that year, but this has been stressful. So I asked David Rubenstein if he would join me. David is the co-founder and co-chairman, executive chairman of the Carlyle Group. He's the chairman of the Kennedy Center. He's the chairman of the Council on Foreign. He's chairman of more chairs than I got in my house. He's also the author of this magnificent book, How to Lead. He's also the author of The American Story, and he's done interviews with me before. But I asked him to come back, not to talk about how to lead, though it may come up, but to talk about civic charity, patriotic giving. Because David has actually led the way in One America, meaning that there's one America and we celebrate it. David, good morning. Thank you for joining me again.
Thank you for having me, Hugh.
How do you calibrate the level of divisiveness in the country right now? Where do you put it on your scale of experience?
Well, it was worse in the Civil War, and we've had other bad times. I would say in 1968, it wasn't very good either, but I would say it's pretty divisive right now, for
It
sure.
is. Now your work, the work I asked you to talk about, I call it civic giving, patriotic giving. What do you call it? Why do you do it? And would you give people some examples of it? I only know about Monticello and the Washington Monument, but you've done so much more.
Okay, well, I call it patriotic philanthropy. What I try to do with this is to remind people of the history and heritage of our country on the theory that if we have an informed citizenry, we'll have a better democracy. That was the premise of the country when we started. We would have informed citizens and they would vote and ultimately would have a better democracy. Sadly, right now, Americans don't know much about our history. In fact, people who take the naturalization test, uh, about 90% of them pass it. But Americans who were given native born Americans, most of them failed it when they were taking it recently. Only 49 out of 50 states, the average citizen who was born in this country took the citizenship test and couldn't pass it. So it shows we don't know much about civics and we don't know much about our history. And the theory is if we don't know much about our history, we're likely to make the same mistakes in the future that we made in the past. And so what I'm trying to do is remind people of our history and heritage, the good and the bad, on the theory that maybe they'll become better citizens and more informed.
You know, the best example I saw that, the reason I got this idea for this conversation, I was at Monticello with the fetching Mrs. Hewitt before the election, and Leslie Bowman gave us a tour, and we went upstairs, which of course is not open to the public, but the last time I was there 30 years ago, it was warehouses and storage room. It's now beautifully restored. And she said, well, David Rubenstein made this happen. And I thought, David Rubenstein makes a lot happen. When did that start?
Well, I started when I bought the Magna Carta and in effect gave it to the United States government. And then I started buying other historic documents like the Emancipation Proclamation, Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights, and put them on display so people could see them. And then when the Washington Monument had its earthquake damage, I helped repair it. Then Monticello, Montpelier, James Madison's home, the Lincoln Memorial, the Jefferson Memorial, Iwo Jima Memorial, the Custis Lee Mansion, on the theory that if people see better uh, reformed and rehabilitated buildings, they're more likely to go to them. If they go to them, they're more likely to learn about American history and hopefully, again, be more informed citizens.
David, that actually is brilliant. And for someone who signed the giving pledges you have, there are a lot of people who want donations. You've concentrated on DC and the area, and I applaud you for that. But how do you determine whether something serves the common good that way? What's the thinking as you assess? Because everyone must be asking you for money.
I do get a lot of requests. And again, I don't hire consultants to advise me. I do it all myself. I don't have a staff or anything. Basically, I say, can I start something that wouldn't otherwise get started? Can I finish something that wouldn't otherwise get finished? Can I see the product of it in my lifetime? And am I going to have an intellectual interest in it so that I'll stay involved, not just give money, but help do other things? But I am very interested in American history and I am very interested in civic responsibility. And so those are two of the things I really focused on.
Patriotic philanthropy did not come up in your first book about the American presidency when you interviewed all those presidential historians. Did that precede the book? Did your generosity precede the book? Is that why you started that series?
I started that series to try to educate members of Congress about history and civics. Like they're making our laws and they should know as much about history as anybody. So I started a series where I interviewed great historians in front of members of Congress. And because of COVID, we've had to end it now, but I think we'll try to restart it next year. And I think it's worked well because members of Congress come together in a bipartisan way. They actually are not throwing anything at each other. They're talking very civilly. And I wish we could do more of that.
I've told people the first lecture I ever heard in college was from Doris Kearns Goodwin. And when you interview Doris Kearns Goodwin, you're talking to the eminent expert on many different presidents. I assume that the turnout for Professor Kearns Goodwin is immense among members of Congress.
Yes, I think when she spoke, we had about 300 members of Congress and their guests, and that's a fairly good thing to get that in one evening, get members of Congress to come together. They enjoy it. They spend about 2 hours there. But David McCullough has been excellent. He was there as well, and many great American historians. And we've also had some non-historians. We had the Chief Justice of the United States come and explain how the Supreme Court works. So I think it's worked reasonably well.
Those are collected at the American Story. I've got How to Lead right here. I am curious about whether or not other people have joined you in patriotic philanthropy. Is that a movement or is that just David Rubenstein?
Well, I'm sure other people are doing very good things. I have not been able to get a lot of other people as interested in this as I would like, and that's my failing. So I'm going to spend more time trying to convince people to do this. I am involved in a lot of other causes as well as other people are, but people haven't been as interested in doing this as I think they should be. And I'm going to try to spend more time in the next 2 years really trying to get more people engaged in this effort.
You know, the Archivist of the United States, he is so committed to making Americans smart again about their civic heritage. You've got an ally there, right?
David Faryo is a terrific person. He was the chief librarian of the New York City and Duke University, my alma mater. He's done a terrific job over the last number of years there. And I've lent them a number of documents, including the Declaration of Independence and the Magna Carta.
Now, David, what I like about it is that you are not a partisan. You started in Jimmy Carter's White House. We talked about that when we talked about How to Lead. And you spent 4 years with President Carter, which is pretty remarkable. There aren't a lot of 4-year veterans of any administration. But you're bipartisan. And I don't know if we keep statistics of people who go to the American monuments that you've restored, but it's a bipartisan effort. It's actually nonpartisan.
Yes, that's correct. I am registered as an independent. I don't give money to any politician of any party. I don't do anything in politics. I'm just trying to do this right down the middle, and hopefully people from both parties will feel that's a good thing to do.
What's your latest project, David Rubenstein?
Well, recently I've been working on a new book, and it's a book about what it means to be an American. And I had a survey done by a major American polling organization, and it came back, and when you were surveyed of 2,000 Americans of what is the most important right we have as Americans, what do you think came out number one? The right to free speech.
Yeah, I guess that, yeah.
That is the number one thing that people care about as Americans. So this book will be coming out next year, and it talks about what I call the genes of America, the things that make America go forward, that make us distinctive, that make us in many ways different than every other country. And I've been just about finishing that book.
Now, you know, Lincoln's first inaugural, we are not enemies, we must be friends, or we must not be enemies, we must be friends. I can't remember the exact phrasing. That is stretched to the breaking, David. Does that get knit back together again?
It's going to be very difficult. We obviously have a divisive situation. Hopefully, we'll get to be better than we are now. But right now, things are fairly well divided. The only way that Americans tend to get together is when we have a crisis. But I don't want to have a crisis that enable us to get together. So hopefully, people from both parties can work together in the future. But I realize it's a big challenge, a tall order.
Now, I went past the Washington Monument this weekend. My wife and I were going out to Great Falls to hike Turkey Run. It's reopened. It's back. People can go to the top again. You know, every kid that came to D.C. was disappointed they couldn't go to the top. How long did that take? And that's a David Rubenstein project. How long did that take?
It took several years to fix it, and then it broke down again. We had to fix the elevator, but it's there now. It's open. It's 555 feet, the tallest building in Washington, and it will always be the tallest building in Washington. And it's a monument to our first president. He wasn't a perfect person, but I do think he deserves a monument like that because he helped get our country off the ground. He won the Revolutionary War as a general. He presided over the Constitutional Convention, and he was our first president. So while he made some mistakes in his life, as all of us have done, I don't think we should detract from what he's done by doing anything that diminishes from the importance of the Washington Monument.
I appreciate that more than anything else you've done. And, you know, I like the Magna Carta of the National Archives because that's where the common law begins. But the Washington Monument was been rescued by you. So on behalf of everyone who has ever been there, thank you, David Rubenstein.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you very much for having me.
It's good to have you back. Again, the book out right now is How to Lead, and The American Story is also out there. Both great Christmas presents. David, be well today. Stay safe. Stay away from the virus.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well.
Bye.
I encourage all of you to know American history.